All right. So, having misconceived the term carbohydrates to represent substances that we are hydrate of carbon, it became like that. But um, there are some drawbacks on this definition, because it states that all organic compounds containing hydrogen and oxygen in proportion found in water are not carbohydrates. So it's a problem. I don't know if this is clear. Let me go back again. There is this misconception that carbohydrate are hydrates of carbon. So they are just expressed because of how the formula look like. So they are just taken as hydrates of carbon. So the term carbohydrate was just derived from this misconception that these substances were hydrates of carbon, substances like glucose and sucrose. But the drawback there is that it states that all organic compounds containing hydrogen and oxygen in proportion found in water are not what? Carbohydrates. So it's a problem. Things like formaldehyde, acetic acid, and lactic acid. In addition, there are many other carbohydrates such as rhamnose, thiamarose, digitoxose. These ones do not usually have hydrogen to oxygen ratios. Even certain carbohydrates that contain nitrogen or sulfur in addition to carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So this brought a serious issue. So in all this, we now have a kind of this led to having a definition of carbohydrates, a new definition of carbohydrates that is now in use. So this new definition of carbohydrates states that carbohydrates are polyhydroxy polyhydroxyaldehyde or polyhydroxyketones or compound produced by what? Hydrolysis. The carbohydrates are polyhydroxyaldehyde or polyhydroxyketones or compounds produced by hydrolysis. In fact, carbohydrates are among the first products to arise from photosynthesis, and they make up a large amount of plant biomass. Carbohydrates like cellulose, starch provide rigid cellular framework and a food reserve. Sugars unite with other compounds to form glycosides and secondary metabolites, while mucilage gums are formed by plants by injury or stress and are typically composed of what? Uric acid and sugar units. Things like brown seaweeds, middle lamella contain polysaccharides primarily composed of uronic acid compound. So seaweeds, middle lamella, they contain polysaccharides that are primarily of uronic acid components. Now, carbohydrates that have low molecular weight are crystalline and they are soluble in water. They are sweet. Example like glucose, fructose, sucrose. They have low molecular weight. They are crystalline. They are sweet. and they are soluble in water. While carbohydrates with high molecular weight are amorphous, then they are amorphous, they are tasteless, and they are less soluble in water. Things like starch, cellulose, inulin. These ones are what? They are large molecular weight carbohydrates, and they are tasteless. They are less soluble in water. Now let's look at classification of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are classified into two: the simple sugars and the polysaccharides. The simple sugars, or simply call them saccharides. You can simply call them, in fact, let's just call them saccharides and polysaccharides. Simple. So saccharides and polysaccharides. So saccharides are simple sugars. They are monomers, at least to some extent, not purely, not they have smaller. They are smaller units, 1 to 4 units, 1 to 4 units, carbon units. While polysaccharides are those from 5 carbon units up, or 6 up. Let's say carbon units. No, it's not carbon units. Sorry. What am I even saying? Carbohydrates are divided into two. You have saccharides and polysaccharides. Let me leave the units, because under saccharide we have the one with 5 carbon units. So it's not about carbon unit, it's about combination of different monomers to form polymer. Let's just leave it at saccharides and polysaccharides. So saccharides are smaller units, while polysaccharides are polymers. So let's leave it like that. Now let us break it down further. Under simple sugars, which are the saccharides, then we now have monosaccharides, disaccharides, trisaccharides, tetrasaccharides. So I'll pick them one after the other, then and I will say one or two things about them. So that this is how carbohydrates are classified. So let's pick monosaccharides. So monosaccharides are sugars that hydrolyze to produce lower sugars with a general formula of CnH2nOn. All these N to N are subscripts. So they are sugars that, in fact, upon hydrolysis, they don't yield any other further lower sugars. They have the general formula of C subscript N, H subscript 2N, and O subscript N. So these monosaccharides are subdivided. They are subdivided into bioses, trioses, tetroses, pentoses, hexoses, heptoses. So these depend on the number of carbon atoms they possess. Have you seen why I corrected the mistake I made? I was talking about units. That polysaccharides is not the number of carbon units more than 5 carbon units, but it's wrong. Please, let's correct that. So because under monosaccharides we have the one with 2 carbon unit, 3 carbon unit, 4 carbon unit, 5 carbon unit, 6 carbon unit, 7 carbon unit, as you see in bioses, trioses, tetroses, pentoses, hexoses, and heptoses. So it all depends on the number of what carbon atom they possess. So let's look at bioses. Bioses contain 2 carbon atoms. This one do not occur free in nature. Then we have trioses. Trioses contain 3 carbon atoms, but they are in the form of phosphoric esters. Example, glyceraldehydes. Then we have tetrosis. Tetrosis contain 4 carbon atoms. For example, we have our erythros and we have our trios. We have our erythros and we have our what? Trios. Then let's look at pentosis. So pentoses are very common in plants. In fact, they are the product of hydrolysis of polysaccharides. So when polysaccharides hydrolyze, they give rise to what? Pentosis. So what polysaccharides am I talking about? We have our hemicellulose, mucilage, and we have our gums. These ones, when these are polysaccharides, so when they are hydrolyzed, they yield pentosis. Examples of pentosis: we have our ribose, we have our arabinose, and we have our xylose. These are examples of pentosis. Then we also have our hexoses. So what are these hexoses? Hexoses are monosaccharides that contain 6 carbon atoms. In fact, they are available. They are abundantly available. In fact, they are abundantly available carbohydrates in the plant kingdom. So here now under hexoses, we have 2 types. We have aldoses and ketosis. So hexoses are obtained by hydrolysis of polysaccharides like starch and insulin. So when this one hydrolyze, when they starch and inulin, not insulin please, inulin, when they hydrolyze, they give rise to what? Hexoses. They give rise to what? Hexoses. So let's look at examples of under hexoses. We have, I mentioned aldoses. So aldoses, under aldoses we have glucose, mannose, galactose. And under ketosis we have fructose, sucrose, and the what have you. These are examples of what? Hexoses. Now let's look at heptosis. Heptosis have 7 carbon atoms. These heptoses are very important in photosynthesis of plants, even in the glucose metabolism in plants. They are very, very important in photosynthesis in plants and glucose metabolism in what? Animals. And they are rarely found accumulated in plants. Examples of them, we have glucoheptose, manoheptose. These are examples of what? Heptosis. Now, that's all you can take on monosaccharides. Let's look at disaccharides. So disaccharides are actually carbohydrates. So saccharides. So you have 2 saccharides. So when they are hydrolyzed, they will yield 2 monosaccharides. So that's the error I committed when I started this. When I introduced classification of carbohydrates. So please, I'm correcting it now. So I said that when disaccharides hydrolyze, they yield 2 molecules of monosaccharides. So that's why they are called disaccharides. Examples of disaccharides: sucrose. If you hydrolyze sucrose, you get glucose and fructose. You get glucose and fructose. And sucrose is the sugar we know, or table sugar we know we use on a daily basis. So it's from sugar cane. So that's sugar cane. Sugar from sugar cane is sucrose. Then maltose. If maltose is hydrolyzed, maltose is a disaccharide. If maltose is hydrolyzed, it will yield glucose and glucose again. 2 molecules of glucose will be produced. Remember that glucose is a monosaccharide. So 2 molecules of glucose is produced from maltose. And maltose is a malt sugar. And the next disaccharide I want us to look at is lactose. Lactose is from cow's milk. So if lactose is hydrolyzed, lactose will give rise to glucose and galactose. Let's know differences. Glucose and what? Galactose. The next one I will look at is the next saccharides I will look at is trisaccharides. As the name indicates, so triglycerides have 3 molecules of monosaccharides. So on hydrolysis, it will yield 3 molecules of what? Monosaccharides. Examples of triglycerides, we have raffinose. If raffinose is hydrolyzed, raffinose is actually from sugarcane too. If raffinose is hydrolyzed, raffinose will yield glucose, fructose, and galactose. Again, if raffinose is hydrolyzed, raffinose will yield glucose, fructose, and galactose. Then another trisaccharide is gentianose. Gentianose. Gentianose is from gentian roots. And if gentianose is hydrolyzed, it will yield glucose, another glucose, and fructose. So it will yield two molecules of glucose and fructose. So glucose, and what? Fructose. Let's look at trisaccharides. Trisaccharides, when hydrolyzed, will yield 4 molecules of what? Monosaccharides. Tetrasaccharides, when hydrolyzed, tetra 4, yield 4 molecules of what? Monosaccharides. Example of tetrasaccharide is stachys. Stachys is found in manna. Let's look at with this we will move over to polysaccharides. At least this the one we can take on saccharides. So let's look at polysaccharides. So polysaccharides are polymers of saccharides. Yes, that's the point. Polysaccharides are polymers of saccharides, while saccharides are the monomeric unit of polysaccharides. So if polysaccharides break down, we form saccharides. That's the point I'm trying to make. So now let us now go over to polysaccharides. Let's now go over to what? Polysaccharides. So if you hydrolyze polysaccharides to the last level, to the latest unit, you start seeing an indefinite number of monosaccharides will be yielded. You yield indefinite numbers of what? Monosaccharides. So if you now get monosaccharides together, different units of monosaccharide, and condense them, then water will be eliminated, and when that is done, polysaccharides are produced. So whatever comes out of hydrolysis depends on the type of product, depending on the type of actual. Okay, let me say something clearly. Depending on the type of product hydrolysis, this polysaccharide can be classified as pentosans and hexosans. Pentosans and hexosans. These are classification of what you see on classes of polysaccharides: pentosans, hexosans. So depending on the nature of the what product yield after hydrolysis. So we have examples of pentosans now. Example of pentosan is xylan. If xylan is a polysaccharide, but it's under pentosan because of the type of product it will yield after hydrolysis. So xylan is a pentosan. Now, things like starch, inulin, cellulose are examples of what? Hexosans. Examples of what? Hexosans. Examples of what? Hexosans. Okay, let's continue. So generally, cellulose is composed of glucose units that are joined by beta 1,4 linkages. Beta 1,4 linkages. But starch contains glucose units connected by alpha 1,4 and alpha 1,6 units. So these linkages are very important. Others like polyuronides, gums, and mucilages are very, very important pharmaceutically. They are actually derivatives from polysaccharides, and they are very, very important pharmaceutically. Remember, our focus on this lecture is just to introduce carbohydrates. We're not going too deep, just to introduce, so that when we start talking about drugs that comes from derived from carbohydrates, we appreciate that. So that's why we are doing this. So I don't want, I'm trying my best not to go deep into all these things, but just let's take it at this level. So we'll stop here for today. In our next class, we go into test for carbohydrates. Test for carbohydrates, that's what we talk about in our next class. Test for carbohydrates. All right, I don't know if you have any question. If you have any question, please feel free to drop it in our WhatsApp group or on the comment section, depending on where you get it, when and how you get this lecture. And God will bless you as you do so. Thank you very much for your attention. See you next time.